5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, are any of you familiar with the name Jonathan Gruber? Mr. Doran, do you know Jonathan Gruber? Do you know that name?
Rings a bell, but I can't call it up.
Anyone? Mr. Rubin, you know Mr. Gruber?
Know the name.
Know the name? You know what he does for, what his occupation is?
I think he's an economist who was enlisted to help with the health care reform. Oh, yeah.
Yes, sir, yes.
Yeah, the famous guy who was, and you know what title he was given when he was the helping with Obamacare and the health care reform? You know what he was titled? Anyone remember? Architect of Obamacare. And, that's one thing, you're the architect of Obamacare and all, but he got a little notoriety in the press and actually had to come and sit right where you guys are sitting a few years ago. Any of you guys know why he was brought in front of the committee and had to sit here? Anyone want to take a guess, Mr. Dean?
Oh, basically he lied about the cost of Obamacare.
Yes, he was deceptive, right? He said things like this. He talked about the stupidity of the American voter. He said, this is a direct quote. He's out bragging after this thing is passed. Lack of transparency is a political advantage. That's a nice way of saying if you deceive people, you might get your way, right? Might help your case. So here is Jonathan Gruber, architect of Obamacare, talking about deception, things like if you like your plan, you can keep it, like your doctor, you can keep it, premiums are going to go down, website's going to work, website's safe, emergency room, everything turned out to be false. And now we hear about another person in the Obama administration, Mr. Rhodes. He comes along, and he's given the title, according to the piece of the New York Times, the single most influential voice shaping American foreign policy. Wow, things are starting to sound familiar. And he creates a false narrative as well. Talks about this echo chamber and deceiving the press. And his derision for the press is kind of like Mr. Gruber's derision for the American voter, because he says something like, what's the line he used there? They literally know nothing, was one of the lines that I think Mr. Rhodes used in his piece. Mr. Rubin, you talked about this false choice that, I think in your opening statement, that Mr. Rhodes set up and used this echo chamber of folks who literally know nothing to further this message to the American people, this binary choice, either it's the deal or it's war. That's what he set up, right? And the thing that strikes me, Mr. Chairman, I won't take my full time here, I just want to make this point is, so this isn't the first time this administration on some big policy decision has deceived the American people. But maybe more importantly, it's not, in my judgment, the first time Mr. Rhodes on a big policy issue, on a big concern to the American people, has tried to deceive them. Mr. Rubin, you're getting ready to say something. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, the deception comes oftentimes in the way of cherry picking. If we want to look at previous Iranian offers or acknowledgments of letters, for example, what's actually interesting is when Supreme Leader Khamenei, on the 30th anniversary of the seizure of the American embassy, a seizure for which no Iranian reformist or hardliner has ever apologized, mocked President Obama for the letters he was sending and said, we are not going to talk to the Americans until they fundamentally change their position. And so one of the reasons why we need this transparency about what you're saying, is sometime around 2012, the Americans fundamentally changed their position, but didn't come clean to the American people about it.
Yep, I thank you for that. Let me just finish up with this then, just to, I think, make this point. Mr. Gruber deceives the American people on Obamacare. Along comes Mr. Rhodes on the Iranian deal, uses deception to create this false choice and help get this, this agreement passed. And as I said, this is not the first time Mr. Rhodes has done it. It's not the first time the administration has done it. More importantly, not the first time Mr. Rhodes has done it. I think he did it on the Benghazi issue. I think he did it there as well. When he said, in the now famous talking points, which frankly became the catalyst for the formation, the reason the House of Representatives and the Speaker formed the committee, when he created this false choice between, it's not a failure of policy, it's rooted in a video. I mean, straight from the talking points. And so, again, a pattern with the administration, what appears to be a pattern with Mr. Rhodes himself, and then when he's given the ask to come testify, doesn't even have the courtesy to show up. So, Mr. Chairman, I yield back my 4 seconds.
I think the gentleman will now recognize